Kia ora, and welcome to another episode of the Family Life New Zealand podcast. I'm Vainand, and I'm looking forward for a discussion today that's going to help you grow in your marriage, grow in your relationship, and help you really pursue what matters most. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Marcus Warner, although he likes to be referred to as Marcus, so we'll just talk to Marcus today. But Dr. Warner has done incredible work in the area of maturity, relationships, and just freedom in your walk with the Lord. He heads up a ministry actually called Deeper Walk. And I've just loved getting to know some of the concepts and the work that Dr. Warner has put out, or Marcus. I'll stop saying doctor soon. I'm going to have a chat today with Marcus and hopefully encourage you on your growth. Now, the reason we're talking today, one of the reasons is that he has, along with Chris, they've authored, and Chris's last name I should have actually got Chris on this podcast, but there we go. Along with Chris Corsi, they authored the book, The 4 Habits of a Joy-Filled Marriage, or of Joyful Marriages. And it's a phenomenal book. We're going to not cover everything in the book today, obviously, because he's already written that. But today I'm hoping to give you some nuggets of wisdom right from Marcus's mouth and to encourage you in your journey. So without further ado, Marcus, welcome to the Family Life New Zealand podcast.
This is a delight. Very, very honored to be here, and especially from different parts of the world. I know it's summer where you are, and we're about to get snow, so it's
it's crazy how it can be summer on one side of the world and winter on the other. But hey, that's just part of the beauty of creation, eh?
Yeah, it is. It really is. Hope to be able to visit sometime. That would be lovely.
Yeah, well, visit in person sometime. You have an open door. We'd love to, see you if you ever come to New Zealand. Maybe we'll be working at arranging some of that to happen in the future. Who knows? But for now, you're visiting us digitally, which is phenomenal. So looking forward to our discussion today. But just tell us a little bit, Marcus, in a nutshell, what do you do? Why do you do what you do? And
Sure.
Why are you excited to be, I guess, sharing with our audience today?
Yeah, well, my background wouldn't have suggested that I'd end up here. I started off teaching Old Testament and systematic theology at a Christian college. And I was expecting to be in academics most of my life. And along the way, God started bringing just deeply wounded people who were looking for someone to pray with them and deal with areas of emotional bondage and spiritual bondage that they were dealing with. And so I kind of developed a side ministry, if you will, of just walking alongside really hurting people. And eventually, God opened the door for me to join a ministry that's what they did. They trained people on how to walk alongside wounded people. And from there, I got connected to people in a lot of different people helping professions and made friends with a guy named Dr. Jim Wilder. And Dr. Wilder is a neurotheologian. So he has been studying the brain at an academic level for over 40 years.
Wow.
And I have not, right? My background is, more of the Hebrew and the theology and things like that. But I have learned from him just an immense amount of information about the brain and how it operates, about attachment theory and how important that is. And so Chris Corsi, who's the co-author, was also mentored by Jim and got the same kind of grounding in the brain science and the attachment theory. In fact, Chris and Jim collaborated together to come up with the very first exercises to help people grow things that were underdeveloped in terms of their neural processes and their and how their brain was functioning, to try to help people who'd gone through trauma develop a new capacities. So again, a lot of our journey started in trauma recovery work and trying to help people who've gone through a lot of trauma learn skills that they had missed. And then what we found out was that these skills just translate into all of life, because what we're really talking about is maturity. We're talking about what caused the holes in my maturity development. How do I fill those holes as I move forward? And then specifically in marriages, it's like, how in the world why am I struggling so much in this marriage? And finding out that a lot of my struggles in marriage seem to have to do with holes in my maturity development. And so all that kind of tied together. And so there's a lot there, but that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at.
That's thank you for that, taking us on that journey. And a few things that you mentioned, really jumped out at me. And you mentioned maturity, which I think I'm going to hope we're going to jump into that a little bit today. And you mentioned joy and exercises. Okay, so those are three keywords. Uh, I just want to say that I'm hoping that everyone listening to this today uh, goes away from this conversation having some practical things that they can implement today to grow in their personal walk, their personal maturity, and also their relationship. And I know they will, because I know you're full of great, useful nuggets, and you've got a way of presenting it so well. But the second thing I hope people walk away from today is just having heard Marcus speak and being able to go and maybe check out some of your other content or books. I've been on a journey, a discovery journey of just getting into some of your work for the last 2 years. It started with Rare Leadership. So I'll
Okay.
ask you a little bit about that today. And then we had just, along with a group that I've been journeying with together, we have just gone through the Joy Starts Here resource, which is a phenomenal journey. So you talk a lot in your work about joy. And sorry, I just
Okay.
probably need to mention, I also recently finished your latest book, Breakthrough, and the 4 Habits of Highly Happy Couples. So if it feels like I know you somewhat today, it's because I've read a lot of your work and it's phenomenal. And that's why I reached out for you to be on our show. So thank you for joining us. So a lot of your work, you talk about joy. And I just want to throw this out there as a question. Like you, you make joy a big deal. It's like almost the foundation of all the change that you encourage. And as someone having worked through helping people work through pain and work through trauma, and in a counseling, I'm not sure if it's counseling or therapeutic or not
Mhm.
therapeutic, but in a
Sure.
people helping capacity, like for someone that's seen so many people and helped so many people, to put emphasis on joy. My first question is, big deal, joy. How is joy really going to make a difference?
Yeah. So, coming out of an academic background, I'm pretty left brain kind of guy. And I tended to just think I need to think correct thoughts and make good choices, right? And everything will take care of itself. And so I spent a lot of my life doing that. Like I just
Educate your way to becoming a better
educate my
person.
way through, think about this correctly, make good choices. And and really is when I discovered Dr. Wilder's writings that joy jumped out, because he was studying the writings of Alan Shore. And Alan Shore is from the UCLA Medical Center. He's been called the Einstein of modern psychoanalysis and such. And he is, uh, and he writes books with, 5 syllable words in them, and so it's interesting when somebody as smart as Alan Shore can't find a better word than joy to describe what it is that the brain is trying to run on, the fuel on which the brain wants to run. I mean, I said that that is what's coming out of the brain science research, is they are the ones who introduced us to joy. So as a Christian, it's a pretty short step to go, oh, the brain scientists are telling us joy is the important ingredient here. I wonder if the Bible would corroborate that. And it's a pretty short step, right? So you're like,
Mhm.
okay, the fruit of the spirit is love and joy and peace and patience. And I'm like, well, maybe God really did intend for us to live with greater joy. So the analogy that's helped me is to think of a ball. And if I think about myself like a ball, and that is that when I'm full of air, I can I can bounce back from things. I can, handle life pretty well. Not much overwhelms me, and I'm going to be okay. But when that ball starts to get underinflated, and it's just harder to bounce back, and I just don't can't handle as much. Or sometimes trauma has punched holes in me, and I'm just going flat. Right? It's like I have nothing in there. What I've learned is that the joy inside that makes the ball work is the air of joy. And you look at it this way, that if I have enough inner joy, I can just handle more pain. I can handle more trauma. I can handle more things, and I can bounce back from it or recover from it. And as somebody once said, nobody ever went to the therapist saying, my problem is I just have too much joy. And if I could just find a way to limit some of this joy, I think I would be, that's not a problem that any of us are trying to solve. So the question becomes, well, is joy something you can quantify? And is it something that you can develop? How does the brain actually experience joy? What are some things that we can do to be intentional about increasing our capacity for joy? Those were the questions that started all of this. And, in my own marriage, what I realized was that um, I was a pastor and I was married for 10 years. And I remember, being on a date with my wife and we were just struggling. And in the struggle, one of the things I realized was that in general, she felt like she got the crumbs in our relationship, that ministry got my best, work got my best, other people's problems got my best. If somebody else was in crisis, they got my full attention. Like she felt like she had to be in crisis to get my attention. And what I realized was that that was because I had learned how to fear bond to people instead of joy bond to them. And so, if the bigger the fear, the more attention you got from me. And I had to kind of learn slowly that that's not a healthy way to live and that it was actually killing my marriage with my wife and that we had what we would call a joy gap in our marriage. And that was there was just far too long between moments when we were happy to be together. And it's the only time she could count on getting my undivided attention was when she had a problem. And so that was part of the journey for us personally of like, okay, it's something here has to change. And so discovering the importance of joy, discovering that that's really the fuel that the brain wants to run on anyway, was truly transformative for the way that I was trying to approach life.
Yeah. So glad you shared that because my next question was going to be around asking you to give us just personal, a bit more insight into who Marcus is and, remove the title, remove the theologian aspect of that at home. Where does this, where was this material actually tested? So you've alluded to that a little bit. And just to say, I'm so glad that you went through that journey because it's often at our moments of pain and dare I say, failure, that we get the biggest breakthrough that
Mhm.
often leads to breakthrough for other people. A way I usually say that is that my biggest relationship stuff ups make for my best radio content.
Yeah,
And isn't
no,
that
it's
true?
true. Yeah,
Because
no, it's true. And I tell people one of the reasons I've written as many books as I have is that I've needed that much help. It's like, you know, everything you're writing about is something that you need to learn,
yeah,
both for your own journey and to help other people with the journey that they're on. And so you're just collecting this information from really brilliant people. And you're collecting this information from people who have been further along the road than you. And you're kind of putting it together and saying, well, this is what I've learned so far.
yeah.
And I hope it, gives you some help too. I'm sure I'm going to learn more in the future. So, but that's
Well,
that's what
and
we're here for.
and that's so good because that's our ethos and how we operate. Like I can maybe impress somebody by my successes, but I really truly make an impact when I'm willing to talk through my struggles and my vulnerabilities and just be real. So you're at the right place. Being real is what we're all about. And that's what I loved about the 4 habits of joyful marriages is it's practical. It's not that difficult. It's not like here's a difficult thing you need to do. And it actually seems too easy. Now, the subtitle of the book says how 15 minutes a day will help you stay in love. That's a bold claim. I mean, really, 15 minutes a day. But let's jump into a few of the concepts that you talk about
Yeah.
in the book. Joy and 15 minutes a day changing your relationship. Like, how can you make a claim like that?
So the reason for the claim is that it takes your brain about 15 minutes, you can have a significant joy connection with somebody else. And so the idea is that by being intentional in having a 15 minutes of joy connection with the other person, it can actually revitalize your relationship much more quickly than you would think. And so, what the goal here, for example, is that We talk about a joy gap, and the joy gap is the amount of time between moments where we are happy to be together, where our eyes lock and they light up, and it's you, and I'm just so happy to be with you. And so what happens
So
is,
that's the
if,
opposite of, oh, you again.
yeah. And so if I am just looking at you as a problem, then I just want to get you off my back, and I just want to get you to stop creating problems for me and just be happy and appreciate what you do have. Right. It's like what happens is I now make fear the foundation of our relationship. And and so some of this comes back to, how do I motivate myself? And that is, if I'm fear motivated in my marriage, then what motivates me are things like, well, I better do this or Brenda's going to kill me. Right. Or I better do this or she's going to be really upset with me. I better
Are
do
you
this.
reading my mind right now or something?
Yeah. and so, and so what happens is, you don't without realizing it, you only ever motivate yourself to do things for your wife or your husband out of fear of what will happen if you don't. And joy is the opposite of that. It is, well, what if I could stop that motivation or catch myself in that motivation, and go, well, is there actually something positive that I could look forward to that would make connecting with my wife something we enjoy? And so that's what we did. So the idea is, well, it's going to take a plan to make that happen. So let's put a plan together on how to do that. And what we found is 15 minutes a day is actually enough time to shrink that joy gap and give yourself something to look forward to every day where you're going to be actually happy to be together. So,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah,
We're all about practical things that people can do. Yeah, we can talk about the brain science and talk about what's beneath all that. I think that's important. Any good methodology or practice or tip or course needs that foundation. But at the end of the day, people just want to know, hey, what can I do to make a difference? And that's what I love about this material. When you talked about this, you mentioned about this is a problem to go away. I've read and heard you talk a bit about when people and problems, when problems become more important than the relationship. So tell us a bit about what happens there in the brain science and
yeah,
when that happens. Someone feels like a problem I wish would just go away rather than a person that I feel deeply connected to.
yeah. What helps me to think about it the most is the idea of an on off switch. So sometimes I'll stick my thumb next to my ear and pretend it's an on off switch. And the idea is that I've got two engines in my brain, and one is a relational engine and one is a problem solving engine. And so what happens is, if I am constantly in fear motivation, then this switch tends to go off and down into fear position. And when it gets into the fear position, the relational part of my brain begins to shut down. I may not go offline completely, but it dims significantly. And when that happens, the problem solving part of my brain takes over. And so if my relational brain is on, I am thinking about my wife. I'm thinking about, you know, what I like about her, what I appreciate about her. It's easy to think of ways to be kind. It's easy to be curious. We can have good conversation because my relational brain is all engaged. But as that part of my brain starts to go offline and fear is beginning to replace curiosity and beginning to replace appreciation and kindness, then what happens is I find myself now trying to do the relationship out of the problem solving part of my brain.
Yeah, if I
So
can
as
just
soon as
fix
I
the problem, we'll be back on track
exa-
again.
exactly. And unfortunately, the problem I'm trying to fix is her. Right. It's like, you are the problem that needs to be fixed here. And so my mind goes to, well, she always does this. She never does that. Why is she always this way? When is she ever going to change? And I have a narrative to support the idea that she's the problem that needs to be solved. So what we try to, what was helpful for me was to learn that there's actually a different problem that needs to be solved right now. And that other problem is, how do I get this switch back on? Like, my switch has gone off. Part of my brain is shutting down. I am now in this problem solving part of my brain. This is not where I want to be. I don't want to stay in this fear motivated problem solving part of my brain. I want to find a way to get back to the joy motivated relational side of my brain. That's a problem, right? So now I got to say, how do I solve that problem? And that's a completely different solution than how do I solve my wife and make her stop being a problem. And so that's where we get into, well, what do I do? How do I do this? And we have some tools to try to help people understand that that's actually a little bit easier than it sounds.
Yeah, and I mean, if you explain it that way, it's easy to say, well, no, I'll never look at it that way, or I'll never think about it that way. But what I've found is that is not a conscious decision. That just happens in a moment. And before I know it, we're in this cycle of there's a problem that maybe triggered something, but now my relational circuits have gone off and we're not effective at actually solving the problem. So that's good. We'll get back to that in a wee while. But talk to us about like the joy gap. You've mentioned the joy gap and shortening that time of joy, but how do you actually define joy?
So, joy, I define simply as relational happiness. And that is, it's that spontaneous, high energy feeling I get that I'm happy to be with somebody and they're happy to be with me. And so I don't actually have to be with that person to feel it. In other words, you could, when you're first in love and you're falling in love and you think about just thinking about that person can start giving you these high energy feelings of joy. But it is still a relational happiness that you're feeling.
Yeah, right.
And so, and so what I found is it's impossible to be in love if you are always in fear,
Mm.
right? To be in love, you have to actually keep that joy motivation front and center. That's how we stay in love. And so when we talk about 15 minutes a day helps you stay in love. It's with the idea that that's what the essence of being in love is that this person makes me feel joy.
Yep.
I love bringing joy to this person.
Yep.
And yeah, so how do we increase our ability to do that?
Yeah, that's good. And what I've found just in our marriage, and yeah, we've been married for 10 years now. So like we've gone through the challenge and struggle of adapting to life with kids and work and the demands that places on us. And then sometimes you can just be going through life together, committed, but you're not experiencing that in love feeling. You're almost, you're focusing on problems to solve, schedules to navigate, and all these different things. And so unless we're really intentional about building joy, we can just forget to. But what you're saying is it's really important. This is the fuel that you need to be running on. So talk to about us about your solution. So give us maybe a 30,000-foot view of your
Sure.
plan framework, and then maybe we'll dive into some of them in a bit more detail.
So the idea is, like I said, all right, we need a plan for these 15 minutes exercises. So we put them into four categories that literally spell the word plan, right? So that make it easy. And the first one is you got to play together. And that might sound simple, but marriage quickly becomes a business. And it's the business of getting to work. It's the business of paying the bills. It's the business of taking care of the kids. It's the business of how we're going to get this done, how we're going to get that done, and what we're going to do about this problem, what we're going to do about that problem. And I tell you, before you know it, your bedroom becomes the boardroom.
I
And
was I was hoping you're going to say that. Otherwise, I was going to say that and remind you, because that's such a great phrase. Your bedroom becomes the boardroom, and I've never thought of a marriage as a business, but you're right. I can relate with how we can easily slip into that way of being together.
well, I just remember, early in our marriage, it's like we'd get in bed and we'd talk about problems for 20 minutes. And then it's like, so you want to have sex now? And it's like, no, because you've just been talking about problems for the last 20 minutes. It's like, so you're like, okay, we need to do some things to create greater joy. So playing together is one of the ways that you do that. We put sex in the category of play, and that is you don't want to lose the ability to enjoy that part of it. But there's also beyond that, just this idea of making sure that you put things in the schedule that you both enjoy doing, so that it isn't all work all of the time. And so that's the first one. The second is listening for emotion. And the difference here again, this goes back to the idea that there's two engines. And so if I am listening to you with my relational engine, I can tell because I listen for your emotion
Yep.
and I can name the emotion that you think you're feeling, not the emotion I'm projecting on you. Right.
Right.
So if I am in my problem solving mode, I project emotions on you and I listen for problems.
And I'm
And
probably
so
listening to formulate my response to solve the problem.
exactly. And so I am listening for the express purpose of solving this problem so I can get on with my life. And the other part of, as opposed to listening for the emotion so that so that you feel seen and you feel heard and you feel the connection that comes from, all right, he gets me, right? He really sees me, he really gets me, he understands what I am feeling and going through right now. The only way to do that is to learn to listen for the emotion first instead of always being a problem listener.
Mm.
And the challenge here is, of course, is that most of us in our professional lives have been rewarded for being problem solvers, right? We got into leadership because we were good at solving people's problems. And so we sometimes don't understand why our wives aren't quite as appreciative of our ability to solve all of their problems uh, as people at work seem to be. But it's because they don't feel seen and don't feel
Mm.
heard and don't feel listened to.
Yeah.
And so that's where number two is. We've got to really cultivate that practice of being correct
Yeah.
in our identification of this is what my wife is actually feeling, and this is why she's feeling that way, and this is how big that feeling is. And I don't have to agree that she should be feeling that way. I just have to realize that she is, in fact, this is where she's at emotionally, and I need to acknowledge that.
That's so important that you said, I don't have to agree that she's feeling that way. I think the journey I've been on has been thinking I've listened and I've been able to solve the problem, and I can just go and solve the problem. But realizing that listening is not an exercise of exchanging data. It's an exercise of connecting emotionally, and it's a way for me to serve our relationship. And listening doesn't have to mean we agree. Listening is like, I'm going to serve you to help unpack that emotion. And sometimes it's not about the problem at all. So I love how you've said listening, but not from a fact point of view. Because I used to think that I was a great listener until I realized, well, I listened to all the facts and then I went into problem solving mode rather than listening to validate
Yeah.
the emotion. Now, I don't have to agree with the emotion to validate the emotion, but that's how we connect. And that's actually
Oh
made a
yeah.
huge difference in our journey.
It really does because you can actually begin to resent the other person that they don't appreciate what a good problem solver you are. and
You're reading my mind again, yeah, Marcus? What?
yeah, so it's I especially when I do as a pastor, I did a lot of counseling for people, and I was like, I was pretty good at it, right? And I'm like, you don't seem to appreciate how good at this I am. and but because what it came down to though was that's not what she was looking for from me, right? Really wanted to feel seen. And what that did is that helped to address the feeling that she was getting the crumbs or getting the leftovers.
Yeah,
Was that was coming because it felt like I was doing the bare minimums to keep the marriage going, and instead of really making the investments to make this something special.
yeah, yeah,
And so to do that, you have to build in time to play together, so it's not always about work. You got to build in time for listening for emotions and making sure that when you are listening, that's your first priority. The third you said 30,000 foot view. So
Oh,
the
we've
plan,
gone up
the
and down, so
PLA.
that's good.
All right.
Let's
So the A is appreciate daily. And part of this appreciation, I find I put two things together with appreciation. One is I went to uh it's a good idea to tell your wife something you caught her doing in the last 24 hours that you appreciated.
mm,
Even if it's simple as, I really appreciate the fact that without even like I asked for some tea before getting on this show because I just finished recording for a long time. My voice, she had three teas brewed and prepared for me, right?
come
Here
on.
going, which would you prefer? Do you want the green? Do you want the black? Do you want this lemon glaze thing? And then I'm like, that's just really, and it's easy for me to just go, oh, I'll take that one, right? And just, thank you and move on. And we treat thank you like a task. Well, I did my task. I said thank you instead of actually taking the time to show the level of appreciation that something like that deserves.
So,
And
so you're
so,
saying appreciation isn't merely thank you.
yes, appreciation isn't merely thank you. Thank you is a task
Mhm.
and you can get it done in 1 second, right? Appreciation takes at least a minute, right? And so you just time it out. It's like, okay, I mean, I need to sit in here and it's like, no, this genuinely made me feel something. And until I have actually felt something, there isn't appreciation behind it. I'm just doing the task of gratitude. And
Right.
so that's what we're after here is feeling some appreciation for at least a couple of minutes every day.
So I know I said 30,000 and we're going into a bit of detail, but we're on the A of plan,
Yeah.
appreciate. Let's actually just dive a little deeper there and tell us about what happens in the brain and how we actually rewire our brain chemistry through appreciation.
Yeah. So the fastest way to grow joy is appreciation. And so from a brain perspective, it's like I need to I need to feel more joy. I need to get there. How do I do that? The answer is practice appreciation. And so that means getting yourself into position to feel something, not just making a list. So when I would go to practice appreciation, I tend to just make a list of things I was grateful for. God, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my job. I'm grateful I have an income, just go down the list. And I couldn't understand why I didn't necessarily feel better afterwards.
Right.
And it was because I wasn't really feeling appreciation for those things. It was just a mental exercise.
Mm.
On the other hand, if I close my eyes and take the time to remember my wife and I on our honeymoon, driving, sitting down next to the beach, and leaning in for the kiss, and all of a sudden fireworks went off across the bay unexpectedly, and how fun that was, and how much we laughed, and taking time to relive an experience and stay in that moment mentally for a couple of minutes, your body can literally begin to feel the same emotions today that it felt back then. But you've got to let yourself live in that for a little bit.
That's
Uh,
fascinating.
So yeah, and so what I found is that appreciation, you can think of it just as simply as past, present, future. That is, what is there in my past that I can routinely go back to, and if I give myself enough time, I can get back into how much I love that. And sometimes it's physical. Like I just remember hiking and I crested this one spot and all of a sudden I saw the view for the first time and and you can go back and you can relive that and feel the emotions and the appreciation. Doing that routinely is good for our nervous system. It's good for our emotional health. It helps us feel joy on a more regular basis. And then once your brain knows that you can get from wherever you are to that place consistently and predictably, it gets less panicky.
Yeah.
Right? Your brain is like, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to survive because no matter what's going on now, I know that within 10 to 15 minutes, I could get myself back to a place where I am appreciating and enjoying something really good from my past. So that would be the past. I can do that with the present, like what's going on right now that I really appreciate, whether it's your attention or whether it's the fact that, wow, this is amazing that I get to be on podcast in New Zealand, where, it's like, everything I know about New Zealand, I learned from Lord of the Rings, right? So it's like and
And
you're
some
like,
of that
what
is
is
true.
some of it's true. Okay. So and so there are things that you can appreciate right now, what's going on in the present. And then there's the future, and that is, and what do I anticipate? And it's very important to have things that you anticipate, like I'm really looking forward to. And so for me tonight, because we had cold weather here, I'm really looking forward to making a fire and having a warm fire in the wood burning stove and spending some time with my wife and doing some things we've been looking forward to. So there's what happens is you just begin to develop more and more categories of things where you can experience joy for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And if you get to the point where you can stay in a place of appreciation for 5 minutes consecutively, uh, on a daily basis for 30 days, it will change your brain chemistry. It will change your default setting. And your brain begins to learn, oh, so joy is what we're supposed to be looking for. And it begins to become a habit. Like your brain will just automatically start noticing things that you like and things that you enjoy. Whereas if you don't develop those habits, your brain will go, oh, what we're looking for are problems. Okay, I can find problems to fixate on. Oh, what we're
Yeah.
looking for are things to be afraid of. Oh, I can
Yeah.
find you things to be afraid of. And it will do that automatically. And let's face it, we're never going to run out of those things. So,
There's a
yeah,
saying, some people have a problem for every solution.
yes,
But that's right. Like we can choose what we focus on. We're going to focus on what we're being grateful for, or we're going to focus on the problem. And I've found that often just changing your perspective, you will always find what you are looking for. And if you're looking for things to be grateful for and appreciative of, you'll find them. If you're looking for things to be critical about, you will find them. Nothing has changed about the actual situation, just our lens and our view has changed. So this is phenomenal. I actually want to say, let's take a moment right now, talk to the couple that is listening, and let's invite us all just to a 30-second or minute of appreciation. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Marcus. You frame us
sure.
up a little exercise, something to take us back, and let's go through an appreciation exercise together.
Sure. So, for example, you might say, what was the happiest memory we shared together involving water? You know, was there a time when we were at the beach, on a lake, and on a boat? What was find a memory involving water where we just both had a great time? And let's if they're different at first, each of you share the one that was the most meaningful to you and what that was like and how you felt and what stood out to you about the memory. And you just take 3 to 5 minutes talking about your favorite memory to do with water. That would be one exercise.
That's
Another
awesome.
would, yeah. So another would be a something like, hey, think about a time you caught your spouse doing something that made you feel really, really happy to be married to them. And it's funny because for my wife, it tends to be when I fix things, right? She goes, oh, I walked into the kitchen and you were fixing the plumbing, and I just suddenly felt so attracted to you.
Where's that
Because I didn't
wrench?
have
Where's
to
that wrench? Let me
ex-
let me go fix some plumbing.
exactly. It's like I didn't have to ask you to do it. I didn't have to nag you to do it. You saw that there was a problem and I felt really taken care of. Right. So there's things like that. So you're looking for, what are the memories? What are the things that have made me feel the most taken care of, the most seen, the most happy that we are together. And I tell people in any gratitude exercise and any appreciation exercise, there's only one forbidden word, and that is the word but.
But yeah.
Yeah. So you can't say, oh, I felt so attracted when you do that, but I wish you'd do it
Mm,
more often. And why don't you do, but it's been years since I've seen you. So that just yanks the rug out from underneath
mm.
the whole experience.
It's like fill up
So
that ball and then just pop it again.
exactly. And so while we are being intentional about building our joy and being with one another, you have to not go to that word but. And
Yeah.
it kind of has to be a hard and fast rule during appreciation exercises.
Yeah, that's really good. And I want to just encourage you listening to this right now to just maybe pause this interview for a moment and take 30 seconds or a minute just by yourself and do that water exercise. Like think about a joyful memory that you share of you and your spouse close to water or doing something around water. Do that and allow yourself to feel that emotion, and then you can continue to listen. And this is really important to stop and actually do this, because our mind can just take in the information and move on and never actually go on to application. And I'm all about application. So thank you for that exercise, Marcus. When you said that, I was reminded of something we did in our Rare Leadership Deeper Dive group. Like every time we would share joy stories. And I know there's
Mhm.
some science behind it. You don't need to go into the science, but I just, joy is contagious, And when someone shared a joy story, like everyone, you could see everyone light up. And I even saw you light up a little bit when you talked about something you enjoyed next to the water. So would you take a moment and tell a joy story about something you and your spouse did that involved water?
Yeah. So my we you can see behind me, I've got national park posters up here. My wife loves the American national parks and all of the things. And we had an opportunity to go to the Tetons for the first time, and there's a lake there called Jackson Lake. And we got there at lunchtime and rented a boat. And it turns out that we were like the only ones, for whatever reason, we were the only ones who rented a boat at lunch, and we felt like we had the whole lake to ourselves. And it's just this crystal clear flat lake with these granite peaks going up all around you, covered in snow year round. And we are out there floating on the water, just taking all of this in. And we're looking at each other like, can you believe, right, that we finally, that we are here? Can you believe that we have this opportunity? And the whole thing was a little terrifying and a little amazing all at the same time, because it's like, you feel really vulnerable because you're like, I am so small and this world is so big and these mountains are so huge and the water is so cold and so deep. And this is just amazing at so many levels. And so, as we live that, if I go back and I think about that moment, that's the moment we can both go back to and share again and again. Like, how does it just remember that amazing, kind of hour we spent out on the lake. Um, Going through there. So yeah, that's one that quickly comes to mind.
Well, thank you for sharing. And when you get to New Zealand, not if, we're going to make this, we need to make this a reality. You will absolutely love Milford Sound. So that's a water mountain experience that is probably on the top 10 of things to do in New Zealand. So hopefully we can make that a reality at some time. Now we've done the P, that's play together. We've done the L, that's listen for emotions. Am I following? Am I on track?
Yes.
The A is appreciate daily. What does
Right.
the N stand for?
The end is nurture rhythm. And the idea here is it starts with an idea that Jim Wilder introduced me to called Joy Camp. And it's a camping analogy that goes like this. When you go camping, the first thing you do is you set up camp and then you make some ground rules, right? It's like you kids, need to stay close to your parents, no running off by yourself. You teenagers, you can go this far, right? But you need to be back by 7 o'clock or whatever it is. You got to be back by set time. The rest of you, you're on your own until we come back, and we're going to have the whole camp dinner here at 7:30 or whatever it is. And so now everybody knows the rules, everybody's free, but the camp has been established, and uh people go off and they have their adventure. And whatever adventure they have, they know that whether good things happen or bad things happen, at the end of the day, they're coming back to Joy Camp, where everybody's going to be happy to see them. Everybody's going to be like, tell us your stories. And whether it was a happy story or a bad story, you're going to love telling your stories and sharing that, and knowing that there are people who are happy to be hearing your stories and sharing those things together. And this idea of turning your family into a joy camp says, we start our days happy to be together. At the end of the day, we want to get people back together in a place where we are all happy to be together, where you got stories to tell. We are enjoying connecting with people over the stories of our day and what went on. And so that's what I mean by a rhythm. There is a rhythm to it. So you can then release people to go out and do what they need to do that day and to be involved in whatever they need to be involved in. And I don't have to be hovering around all of that all day long, knowing that we are going to get back together. And there's going to be a time when it's just about us and just about connecting and just about the joy. And that's what we mean by nurturing rhythms. And if we don't do that, then what tends to happen is that gradually tasks just take over everything. And you just move from task to task to task. And again, that's where the bedroom becomes the boardroom kind of thing kicks in, because you're so one of the things that we started doing in our marriage was we sort of put an invisible fence around the bedroom and said, we will talk about problems in the living room at the couch. We will talk about them in the kitchen. We'll talk about other places. As soon as we get into the bedroom, we are done talking about the problems. We're going to be happy to. This is where we talk about things that we are appreciating, things we're anticipating, things we're happy about. And it makes a real difference because you can relax a little bit and feel safe, like you're not going to get ambushed by something. And so you think about like with the camp and things like that, what could ruin that for everybody is if it gets to be the appointed time and someone's not there. And then
Right.
it gets to be a half hour late and they're still not there. It gets to be an hour late, they're still not there. Okay. Now, because what happens with this is you're not okay until everybody is okay. And that's part of what you're trying to do with a family is you're trying to establish this feeling like I want everybody to be okay. We want everybody to be back here and happy to be together. And then, once that's there, we're going to be good. And so that's part of this idea of like we got to find ways to nurture rhythms into our lives that allow for rest and allow for storytelling and for joy. And I think it's one of those like some very popular TV shows I've noticed often end with extended family, multi-generational family around a table, happy to be together. And it just speaks almost universally to people like, I really crave,
Resonates. Yeah.
right? I really crave that. I would love to be a part of a multi-generational group that I knew was going to be happy to see each other at the end of every day, where you can share the ups and downs of life. And what that does is it helps us with our resilience because we know we're never going to have to go through anything alone. And we know that no matter what happens, there's people who are going to be happy to be with me.
Mm.
And that just makes all the difference in the world.
That's so good. That's so good. So we nurture rhythm. When you were talking, I just had this image of life, something that creates life. And when you say nurture, I'm thinking of a plant. I've got one right behind me there, and it's Valentine's Day coming up soon for us. And I just did something different this year, and I actually went out and I bought some flowers, not not flowers to give as a bunch to my wife, but I actually planted some flowers in the garden. It's and it just actually made a big difference to our entryway. Like as we come into our home, there's some flowers
And
there now, and every day we go out and come in, like that's a big win. I wish I had ideas like that all the time, but I had this time, and I'm thinking about that as that's a nurturing exercise. Those things don't come up by themselves; they take intention. You actually need to get up and do something, but then they can also easily fade away. Like rhythm, healthy rhythms. It's called rhythms, not moments.
right.
It's easy to have a joy moment, but having a joy rhythm takes some nurturing and some caretaking. And so,
I'm sorry. Again, rhythms can be daily, they can be weekly, they can be monthly. They did some studies on the happiest cultures in the world. And one of the things they found was that they have these rhythms built into their cultures. And so, like every weekend, it's common for extended family to get together. And once a week, it's common for friends to get together and have dinner or take a walk and do things together relationally. And when you've got these relational rhythms built into your life, they give you a sense of stability and a sense of I'm going to be okay because I don't have to go through this stuff alone.
that's so good. So nurturing rhythm is so crucial. Like we wanna make sure we do that. So just one more time, Marcus, take us through the plan, and then I want you to actually talk to us about joy. When I first heard the concept joy, I thought, well, it sounds like fun, and fun is good. I like fun, but fun doesn't necessarily sound like the adult thing to do, like the responsible thing. And so I think joy is so important. But a lot of your work, you talk about maturity, and you talk about joy, and that's actually a mature thing. The more mature we are, the quicker we can return to joy. So I've found that as to be a radical mind shift for me personally. So I'd love for you to just share briefly, give us the four again, the plan
Sure.
and summary, and then just talk to us about the joy maturity link, and how do you actually bring these worlds together?
Okay. So the plan, again, in a nutshell, is play together, listen for emotion, appreciate daily, and nurture a rhythm.
And I just want to say at this point, like the book Four Habits of Joyful Marriages have exercises in the book on all of those things. So super practical. We are just working on getting a shipment to New Zealand, and so they'll be available on our store, I believe, when you listen to this interview.
Yeah, and Chris's specialty is in exercises. So we co-wrote the book partly because my specialty is explaining things in a simple manner, and expertise is the exercises themselves, and he has developed a bunch of them. We also have a website called fourhabits.org that have about 30 more exercises and things for people to do. So it can help to have some variety.
Awesome.
The Now, in terms of joy and maturity, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up and I thought about a mature person, I tended to think about someone who was very stoic, and that is that who almost never smiled. And so they were deep thinkers who, and partly because I grew up a child of the what's been called the greatest generation, right? My father and mother grew up in the Great Depression. My father fought in World War II. They were both jungle missionaries in Africa. They went through a lot of hard things, and when I think about that generation, most of the people I think of are kind of stoic and have endured a lot of things. But what I began to realize, what the joy helped me understand, was that real maturity is not stoicism. Real maturity is the ability to be the person in the room who helps everybody get through that stuff and still find their joy. It's the and I saw both of my parents get really good at this later in life. They didn't start off good at it, but once they grabbed a hold of the concept and they started working on it, I saw both of them grow after age 65 in ways I would not have expected to
Wow.
see. And
You
the
mean you can still change at 65?
yeah, isn't that remarkable? Right. No, it's um nobody ever becomes perfect, and that's not even the goal. But what happened was, realize that you think about it, it's like, who do you want to talk to when you've got a problem? Do you want to talk to somebody who's just going to say, suck it up and get through it? Or do you want to talk to somebody who's going to help you find your joy again,
Right.
despite all the hard stuff that you're going through? And you're like, that is the mature person that you're looking for. So maturity can be defined as the person who can handle the most emotional weight
Right.
and not lose their ability to live with joy.
Wow. Can we just
Mm.
have that one more time? So the
Yeah.
person who can handle the most emotional
Emotional weight.
weight and not lose their
And
ability to remain in joy.
yes. And so if you define it that way, you're looking for a different set of characteristics, right? And you look around, you say, so that means the most mature person here isn't the one with the most degrees. It's not the person who makes the most money. It's not the person who's had the most success or the most fame,
Or the
right?
best
It is
arguments.
yeah, right? All of these things are the base is who can go through the most stuff without it changing who they are, without it turning into somebody they're not, without them melting down relationally, without them blowing up relationally, but they can recover and they can help other people recover and they can help everybody kind of get back to feeling like they're going to be okay and find some joy again. That's maturity. And so that's why they are connected. And so the my capacity to handle hard things is going to be directly related to my capacity to be able to return to joy after things get hard. And so the most resilient people are the ones who go through hard things regularly and regularly will get back to a place of joy. Um, when I can't get back to a place of joy, that's usually because trauma has me stuck and because trauma is undermining that function in my brain. And so I have to sometimes do some healing work to be able to get there more regularly. Uh, but it all works together, right? Because part of what I'm doing in the trauma recovery work is I'm trying to heal those things that have sucked the joy out. And but I am also saying it's not enough just to do repair work. I've also got to do some rebuild work and some regrowth work and grow my ability to find joy again. And and the idea is not happy all the time. It's the idea that I'm not, is that I still have an ability to find joy even when I'm going through hard things. I sometimes think of it as simple as stopping and smelling the roses along the way. It doesn't make, I think one of the challenges I found is like if you think about scales, when life is really hard, it's like the scales do this and it's like there's a big things weighing this part of the scale down. And so to say, I really like this cup of tea and I really enjoy this feels so shallow and so insignificant compared to the big thing that's weighing my life down
Yeah.
that what happens is I don't give myself permission to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so, but we're not looking for things that are equally as big and joyful as the big problems I'm dealing with. We're simply giving ourselves permission to actually enjoy those things and to really connect to those things that we still enjoy. I saw a movie, Last Samurai, many years ago, and one of the things that jumped out to me about that movie was like in this samurai village, they're about to go into a battle where they fully expect to lose, and yet this guy's taking the time to walk through the cherry blossoms and enjoy the cherry blossoms,
Mm.
not because the cherry blossoms are going to change the problems, but just because he has developed this habit of, you know what? I can still look for things to enjoy in life. I can still look for reasons to have happiness. And the problems are still going to be there, and I'll still have to deal with them. So that's where we're looking at. We're not talking about living in denial and being happy all the time. We're talking about not losing our ability to find things to enjoy even when life gets hard.
That is so good. And it's almost as you were putting up those scales, I thought, yes, the weight of this little appreciation of this cup of tea isn't going to tip the scales, but if I have 10 or 15 things, it might actually bring a bit of balance back. And
Yeah.
I'm filled with capacity to go and deal with life's problems. And I think we want to have a vision for our homes, our families, our marriages to be a place of restoration so that we can go and fight that battle and then come back and be restored and be equipped and renewed. Thank you, Marcus, for the work that you do and for helping people understand things. Like I, I get that when you said your specialty was explaining complex things in a simple way. I love how you have these simple statements that's part of your work that I must admit, initially I didn't get. I didn't get like, what is it like me to be right now? It's like it's a weird who talks that way. But now that I understand the principles of acting like yourself, even though you're in a difficult situation, that's actually a part of maturity. So we can't go into that on today's show. I have one more question for you before we wrap up, and that is this thing of joy. And you talk about your background as a scholar and the Hebrew and obviously how faith plays into that. Now your book is written to all audiences, not only to the Christian
Mm.
audience. But I'd love for you to just share the gospel from the perspective of joy and maturity and the work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is, we often think of the gospel as you're bad, but God will, pay for that and he'll let you into heaven anyway. And that's kind of how the gospel feels a lot of times. And, uh, and the idea is, okay, now that God paid the penalty, you're still a bad person, but try to be good now. Okay. And so sometimes Christianity gets portrayed that way to people. It's not very motivating. It doesn't feel very hopeful. But if we look at Christianity as salvation as an attachment with God, and that what he is actually inviting us into is to share his joy. It says in Psalm 16:11 that joy is found in the face of God. Well,
Wow.
very few people that I know think of God's face as joyful. And yet he's the most mature person around. He can handle all of the hard things in life and not lose his joy. He can handle all of these hard things and still be happy to see you. and still invite you into his presence and into that relationship. And so if you look at, people often say Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. I'm not sure what that means. And the idea here is, well, it's an invitation to do life with someone who is very happy to be with you, who loves you very much, and who feels joy when he thinks of you. And so if you go back to, for example, the common priestly blessing that Aaron gave to the people every morning, and that is, may God's face shine upon you.
Mm.
You're like, well, what does it mean for a face to shine on somebody? I don't think it's talking about rays coming out of his, right? It's just your face lights up with joy because it's you. And I
Wow.
think that this is what this is all about, is God saying, I actually love you. I want you to invite you into this joy. And right now, there's some things separating you from me, but I've taken care of all of that. If you will accept it and you will, admit your need for it, I will welcome you in and we can share joy together. And that's the goal, is knowing that everything that I go through in life, God's happy to go through it with me. And that makes a world of difference.
That's so good. And as you shared that, Jesus said something, and I can't get the the correct words, but he talked about that your joy may be full. I think something they shared with his disciples, and I've actually always wondered what that meant. But
Yeah.
this makes so
Like,
much sense. And as you were sharing about the face lighting up and the rays, this morning my face lit up because of my 3-year-old Gabriella's eyes who lit up, and she was making a little joke and being silly, and I was just laughing at her, and smiling towards her, and my smile just made her smile even more, and it made me smile even more, and it was just such a
right.
moment of pure joy. It's like, if you can just bottle that and find a way to give that to the world. Doesn't the Bible also talk about a joyful heart being like medicine? Um, but this, thank you. Like, I have never heard someone talk about the gospel, the good news of Jesus and what he did and a relationship with God explained in the way you just did. So I'm glad I asked that question. And I just want to take a moment, if you're listening right now and you may have actually been walking with the Lord for most of your life. You may have only recently come to know him, or maybe you've not actually had that relationship. Uh, we're talking about the God who's glad to see you. We're talking about the fact that, just as Marcus explained now, he's actually made provision for us to be in a joyful relationship again. So maybe you came to Christ out of fear, uh, but I want to invite us all into just saying, let's experience that joy filled. I'm happy to see you. I know there's that piece in Zechariah where it talks about the Lord rejoices over you with singing. He's happy to see you, and so may that be your experience today. Marcus, Dr. Warner, I thank you so much for taking some time to come and share with us today. And I hope we can get you out to New Zealand at some stage to share at maybe one of our marriage conferences, or just maybe come for a vacation. Just let me know when you're here, so we can show you around. Love to do that.
I appreciate that very much. It would be a true pleasure. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.